The Indian Way, Chapter 6. I ran until darkness slowed me to a near crawl. I removed my extra layers of clothing and tied them around my neck, waist, and arms, hoping they would dry and fend off pests. After the sun set, it was pitch black in the thick forest. Occasionally I crossed a clearing and could see a short distance ahead. I had always considered myself brave, but there in the darkness, fear gnawed away at my courage. I felt like an unwelcome intruder. The forest had a pulse. In the dark, each crackling step felt like a living being was under my feet. Insects buzzed and animals chattered continuously in this never-ending nightmare. Blood-curdling shrieks erupted from close by, and my face and then my body ran ice-cold under the skin. Branches attacked my arms and face, forcing constant changes of course to navigate around impassable brush. The last days of spring were transitioning to the early days of summer. The realization that I was lacking many supplies necessary for protection or survival began to raise doubt in me about the wisdom of my choice to flee. I drank water and rested for a few minutes whenever crossing a fast-running stream. Having nothing in which to carry water proved a challenge, but there were many streams. My destination was west. With every stop I listened carefully for sounds of pursuit. The many sounds around me made this difficult, but childhood experience had taught me the unnatural noises to listen for that were made by man. Slowly that first night, the woods around me began to brighten. I could smell and feel the dampness of the forest all around me. Curiosity and perhaps a tinge of panic led to a search for high ground. The search yielded results moments later. A small clearing provided an open look at the surrounding hills and a rolling valley to the north. The sky above was changing to blue. I gathered several sticks and rested, waiting patiently for the appearance of the sun. The sun hesitantly peeked over several distant mountains. The feeling that this sunrise had somehow turned the pages to a new chapter of life rose from deep down inside of me. After a moment of reflection, I carefully arranged the sticks I had gathered to mark the direction of the rising sun and to mark the direction toward the west. I walked backwards into the woods away from the arrow and found a thicket of brush to hide in. Settling cautiously onto the forest floor, exhaustion overtook me. There was a deep weariness that was brought on by a pounding heart resulting from fear and continuous movement from dawn to dusk. I awoke some time later sore and confused. Many dreamless hours of sleep left me temporarily befuddled. After coming to my senses, I stumbled toward the clearing in a panic to find the carefully arranged sticks. Despite the sun having set behind the trees, it was still just barely light. Locating the sticks and seeing the direction they pointed allowed for continuation of the journey west. My father had taught me some basic survival skills. Wandering in the woods often had allowed for the use of some of these skills. During childhood, Father had showed my brother and me some of the plants we could eat and others that would make us sick. This was useful, but without certain items, survival would be difficult. The flint rock and metal Mother provided allowed me to make small fires. Fires I nervously put out after a brief period for fear of being discovered. A gun, a knife, and a container for water were items that would need to be acquired. Despite the risks and moral opposition, I accepted that stealing these items was the only option. There were many outlying farms and neighboring communities that needed to be avoided. Contact with anyone would make it easier for any pursuers to track me. Stealing a gun and a knife proved to be much easier than expected. The morning after my second night in the woods, I began to search for farms. Frontier farms working in the fields were cautious but often had to set items down while working. Years of sneaking around in the woods proved to be beneficial. After only a short search, a clearing became visible through the brush ahead, and an old farmer was visible toiling in his field. He was bent with age and paused frequently for a deep breath, but wore a continuous grin as he went about his field work. His knife was sheathed in his belt, and his gun was never more than 10 yards from his hand. I admired him. He seemed content with his place in life, and it was hard to imagine doing anything that would change that. I faded slowly back into the forest and continued the search. A short time later, another field emerged. Creeping into the new clearing, a knife and flintlock rifle with a leather ammunition pouch sat not 20 yards away on a large rock. There was no one in sight. Stealing the rifle left me overwhelmed with feelings of guilt. Without the gun, the farmer and his family's ability to eat and be safe was compromised. Trying to replace the weapon would be costly and likely difficult for the farmer. The acceptance that I could not survive without the gun helped to ease my guilt. Repeated failure led to desperation to gain possession of either a leather or wooden costrel for carrying water. The problem was the farmers carried these on their belts and rarely, if ever, set them down. After 2 days of spying on numerous farmers, it became obvious my only chance to obtain a leather container would be at night. Entering a home or village shop would be the only way to do it. Just before daybreak of my 3rd night traveling in the woods, I encountered several fields very close together. After further exploration, a clearing with 4 houses spread about presented itself. A dog barked lazily somewhere far to the left of the clearing. I retreated back into the forest and carefully located a hiding place for all of my newly acquired possessions. This proved to be a very wise decision. Back in the clearing, I chose to approach the house furthest from where the dog had been barking earlier. The door was made of tree bark. It was heavy. I grasped the handle that appeared to be made of deer antler and lifted the full weight of the door while pushing inward. The door was placed back down carefully with only the slightest scraping sound on the earthen floor. Moonlight shone through the now open door to provide some visibility in the darkened cabin. Soft breathing of the sleeping occupants was the only audible sound. The smell of an earlier dinner still wafted in the cabin air. Hanging to my right was a costrel. Slowly, nervously, I extended a shaking hand toward the leather container. I removed the full container and shifted to retreat, but not before noticing a basket on the table. The basket was full and the contents were wrapped in a cloth. A hunger pain made its presence known. My stomach constantly ached due to lack of food after a diet of only berries and roots for days. My mouth watered for a taste of the baked bread in the basket on the table 5 strides away. After just 2 steps, a nervous voice from the shadows to my left cautioned me not to turn around. "Mister, I'm not aiming to shoot you, but a man will do what he must to protect his loved ones," the man cautioned. "Put your hands in the air and head right back out that door." The rest of the small cabin's occupants began shuffling out of their sleeping places to get a look at the cause of the excitement. Thoughts of running entered my mind as I stepped back into the chilled night air, but facing me was another rifle-wielding farmer and the dog that had been barking earlier. I came to regret that the first man from inside the cabin, Amos Perkins, was not the person who decided my fate. Within minutes, the occupants of the 4 houses had gathered, and 4 men were engaged in a deep conversation about how the situation should be properly handled. Amos Perkins appeared to be a kind soul. He quickly emerged as my defender in the ensuing discussion. 2 other men, one they called Owen and another named John, were angry and seeking a swift and firm conclusion to the affair. The 4th man, I never heard his name, was quiet and seemed content to let the others determine what should be done. At first their voices were too low to hear, but eventually they became more animated. The way I see it, then, is with two choices. We either take him to Bickford and let them deal with him proper, or we deal with it here and be done with it, the one called Owen offered. Up Bickford, they'll give him 25 public lashes for sure, or maybe a short stay in the stocks before they send him on his way. We could do the lashes right here and save the day's lost labor. We are fast running out of days until harvest, John added as he looked toward Amos. Amos was slow to respond. Finally, he spoke firmly, but in a calm manner. He's only a young man. He snuck in here with no weapons and only tried to take a drink and some food. Most likely he has run off from somewhere and didn't think it through. We would have fed him if he had just asked. The problem is he was stealing. We should ask him why he tried to steal. If he steals, then he will lie as well, Owen snapped. John was nodding approval to Owen's statement, but still countered hesitantly with, "Could it hurt to hear the boy speak?" My mind was racing. As the sky began to brighten to the east, constructing a story that would make sense was proving difficult. Nothing would come. All 4 men were now staring at me, and 2 looked angry. A large group of women and children of all ages had gathered 20 yards behind the men. Some looked afraid, but more stared at me curiously. For a brief moment, I caught sight of a young woman in the crowd. Abigail Reed's face briefly appeared before reality returned, and the understanding it was not her. Amos stepped forward and appeared ready to ask questions. I decided to speak first and avoid an interrogation. In the past, a good twisting of the truth had worked best for me with my father rather than outright lies, so that was the strategy enacted. My name is Silas. I ran away from the community I was raised in 6 days past. Considering their time concerns, this seemed like a better approach than admitting it had only been 3 days. The decision to leave was made hastily, and if you were to try to return me there, I would run away again. For this reason, I will not tell you where my home is. I stopped here only to secure food and drink after a week of eating only berries and roots and drinking water from streams. I stole only to avoid the possibility of being forced to return home. Please do not ask me to discuss the private family matters that have brought me here. I thought they might respect my being discreet on this subject. I had no intention of causing harm or taking anything of consequence, I concluded. The 2 groups in the clearing were staring at me. Any looks of fear had disappeared. Many faces now showed looks of understanding, so it appeared the story had the desired effect. Rebellious, stubborn youth was tired of the switch. The group of men held a quiet conference. They spoke low so no words could be heard. They were joined by the 2 oldest boys from the other group. Amos and Owen seemed to be the most vocal. In the end, they decided to take care of the matter themselves. A modified sentence of 10 lashes to my bare back and send me on my way. The punishment would be enacted immediately. I was instructed to strip off my own shirt, while Owen retrieved a leather flogger from his home. The wooden-handled instrument had multiple leather-knotted straps extending from the handle. They had no shackles or stocks, so the punishment was inflicted as I raised my arms and leaned against the side of Amos Perkins' cabin. The families had all gathered around, but there was a dreary silence. Unlike experiences in Roxbury, most of these people seemed to regret what was going to happen. Owen asked if I was ready, and I responded with a nod of confirmation. The first 3 or 4 lashes were bearable. They hurt, but the pain was quick to go away. After that, each lash left a stinging sensation that would not abate. There was an intense heat, and my back felt like it was swelling as if from multiple bee stings. The whipping was over quickly. Determined to be brave and strong, the struggle to stay on my feet became a challenge. Images from childhood of people receiving 25 or more lashes came quickly to mind as a new respect for their plight emerged. Amos Perkins and his wife were there quickly to help me keep my balance. They guided me toward their cabin door and helped ease me down onto a wooden bench once inside. Goodwife Perkins heated water and placed a warm, wet cloth on my back. After some careful preparation, she also gently applied some slimy substance on my back that instantly soothed the burning sensation. Amos recommended that I get some sleep. After a moment's hesitation, the realization that ignoring my aching body and exhausted mind was impossible. We met eyes briefly and exchanged nods of agreement. He helped me to a corner of the cabin that had been prepared with cloth over a pile of leaves, and instantly sleep engulfed my battered body. When I awoke, Goodwife Perkins sent one of her children to the fields for Amos. A boy a little younger than me sat in the corner looking extremely nervous with a rifle resting uncomfortably on his lap. Goodwife Perkins checked my back while we waited and reapplied the same soothing substance she had hours earlier. The burning again subsided. She assured me the swelling and pain would diminish in a few days with continued reapplication. She provided a bucket full of warmed water and a small mirror. It was impossible to ignore the haggard look of my face and dark circles framing exhausted eyes. The image in the mirror had changed dramatically in such a short time. My light brown hair appeared darker, and previously sharp facial features now appeared to sag slightly. The warm water on my face brought a feeling of instant relief. Cupped hands splashed water to the crown of my head repeatedly. After only a short time, Amos, whose home I had broke into hours earlier, came through the door cheerily. He shuffled around the room and grabbed a couple of items from the table. "You have slept away a good portion of the day, young Silas," he said with a laugh as he walked toward the door to exit the cabin. "Follow me." As I followed Amos, Goodwife Perkins and the boy from the corner each trailed me by a few steps out of the cabin. Once outside, Amos turned. His face changed, and he gave me the look an adult gives you before the beginning of a lecture. Amos had a kind face. He removed his leather cap to reveal a pale forehead in contrast to his tanned cheeks and neck. His face was streaked with sweat from his day's labor. He squeezed his hat in both hands nervously as he began. "Silas, I understand you have your reasons for the decisions you have made. I am pleading with you now to think about what has brought you here and consider if there is any way you can fix your troubles and return home. You look worn after your brief journey. The path you are on is a dangerous one, full of peril and death," he cautioned, and paused to let his previous words sink in before continuing. "You will find scattered settlements for another few days west of here before you come to Indian country. The Indians have been fighting between themselves, and some are even using guns now. To the south you may find settlements for a ways, and even find many willing to help if you ask. Whatever you decide, please take this, and good luck in whatever path you choose." He extended a tied-up piece of cloth in one hand, and the same leather container I had taken briefly the night before in the other hand. Amos Perkins gave me the items, and then extended a hand to shake. Goodwife Perkins scrambled forward to provide a firm hug and well wishes. I thanked them both for their kindness, and assured them consideration would be given to his words. While inspecting the cloth later, I found it to be stuffed with fresh bread and a good portion of dried meat. The leather costrol did not contain water. It was full of cider. They were two of the kindest people I had ever met. After leaving the clearing, I returned to the spot where the stolen possessions were hidden, secured them, and quickly continued west despite Amos Perkins' words of caution. Perhaps Father was right when he constantly claimed that I was a stubborn child.